My name is Amy Greenberg. I'm the Director of Internships and Student Services, and I want to officially welcome you to our presentation this afternoon. But I want to take a moment to thank you all for your hard work in providing field instruction for our students. You support our students in navigating a key component in their educational journey, and our students couldn't do it without your guidance and support. So once again, we thank you. And at this time, it is with great enthusiasm that I introduce to you one of the stars on the Student Services team here in the School of Social Work at Loyola, Sylvia Corcoran. Sylvia is an LCSW and has been working in the School of Social Work at Loyola as an internship coordinator for the past 4 years. She works with our BSW and MSW students as an internship coordinator. She is invested in supporting adult learners to develop and cultivate their skills. In her perspective, field instruction is the place where adult learners assume responsibility for their learning and recognize the value of their engagement. Given that the first level field placement is a generalist placement, students often have the misconception that if the placement isn't ideal or is uncomfortable, then the placement is of little value to them and that no learning can take place. She is deeply committed to dismantling this notion and strives to support students to navigate the discomfort that often accompanies growth. Students can learn just as much from an internship experience that they love, as well as one that they are challenged. Sylvia brings her sense of humor to our team, often providing needed comic relief, as we can all identify with in the field of social work. I am excited to share with you her knowledge and research that she has done to prepare for this important topic of having difficult conversations with students. Please help me welcome Sylvia.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Amy, for that very nice introduction. Do you ever go someplace and you hear people give like a really gushy, flowing kind of introduction, and then you're like, who are they talking about? Well, she was talking about me. It just felt nice. It kind of felt like she was talking about somebody else. Thank you. That was very kind. I want to say and echo some of the same sentiments that Amy expressed about your importance and value, because you're on the front lines teaching, modeling, molding, shaping the future of social work, whether you be a field instructor or a field liaison. And we have some that are double duty here. I just want to recognize them. They're here at this table here. Joyce Weston and Kelly Hendrickson are two of our field liaisons. So I just want to recognize their presence here. And I also want to recognize and thank the Student Services team, Director Amy Greenberg and Hillary Gilway, who's the coordinator for second level students, who's sitting in the rear. We also have an advising team, and everything that we do together, and we support one another. And this has been a goal of mine for some time, to present on a topic of interest for field instructors. And just so you know, this topic is born out of data that we've collected when we give out evaluations, that field instructors want more teachings on this, want more trainings on how to have difficult conversations. So we meet as a committee once a month, and we come up with these topics based on your feedback. So that's why we're here today together. So I'm delighted to be here to share with you. I can't say it enough what an invaluable resource you are in the field, because we couldn't do what we do if you weren't out there training the students. And so to be able to provide a field instructor training, because we can't compensate you monetarily, so this is kind of an intangible way of paying it forward by providing a training for you, and of course the CEUs. Why discuss this topic? Have any of you ever had to have a difficult conversation with students? I imagine so. That's why you're here. So that's why we're having this conversation about how to have difficult conversations with students. But the things that you'll learn here today are applicable to other situations, not just with students. It can be with peers, with your colleagues. It could even be in your personal life, but I just would caution not getting that clinical hat on so much with your family members, because they can see right through it and they're not having it. They're not having it. My husband often says to me, I like to speak with my wife, Sylvia, and not the clinician, Sylvia, please. Can she please enter the room? But sometimes we just do that because that's kind of inherently who we are. The long answer to the reason why we have this kind of training is that we can all improve on our communication skills. And in your packets that you have a lot of different information on language, because the words that we use to convey what we mean, sometimes we select the wrong ones. And so we want to be really intentional about the language that we use and make sure the words accurately capture what it is we want to say. So that's why you have those handouts about sensitive, using first person language, just as information. But you also have the content of what we're going to speak about today. I also want to say that many people shy away from having difficult conversations because they're afraid of conflict. And I personally, I think I'm cut from a different cloth because I love conflict, but not for the sake of just being cantankerous and angry and, chaotic and divisive or whatever. I love conflict for what is born out of the successful resolution of conflict. And for me, what is born out of the successful resolution of conflict is greater intimacy, enhanced understanding when you get to the good part, after you get through the rough stuff. So that's why I love conflict, because it's like an invitation to problem solve. It's an invitation to kind of see what you bring to the situation, what the other person brings to the situation, and then it's an invitation to kind of collectively collaborate on an outcome that you both or all of you can live with. And it doesn't mean that you get everything that you want. You don't always have to come away from the table like ecstatic, okay? Sometimes you come away mildly satisfied. Sometimes that might be the best you can do, but it's just a really good way. You can't have peace, for me, without conflict. So that's why I like conflict, because it's an invitation to problem solve. These are our objectives for today: to identify the 3 listening skill clusters. And I have termed listening skill clusters as involving your eyes, your ears, and your mouth. You're attending with your eyes, engaging the listener by looking at them with your eyes. You're also attending with your ears by listening to where and when you need to supply or provide a verbal cue to convey that you're following the speaker. With your mouth, you'll repeat back to the listener what you've heard. And then the 6 components of active listening, and we'll kind of go into those a little bit in depth a little bit later. They're on the screen there. And what we're going to do now is a listening exercise, and you should have this in your packet. So I'm going to read through it, and then we're going to ask some questions. So put your listening ears on. You might recognize some of the people in this. On Thursday, I came out of the apartment at 7:30 on the way to work. I was hurrying, as I had to be on time. At the bottom of the stairs, I tripped over an umbrella left by Michael Jackson, who did not want a wet umbrella in his apartment. I twisted my ankle, seriously hurt my hand, and messed up my hair. I had a very hard time using my computer at work, and I got into trouble with my boss. Luckily, when I pulled myself together after my fall, my carpool was still waiting. I brought my friend today, Prince, who was there and saw all the injuries as a witness. That afternoon, I went to see my lawyer, Mr. Sharp, at 5338 North Broadway, who said I could sue Michael Jackson. I called Michael Jackson to work it out, but he hung up on me. So then I called a social worker to set up this mediation. So my questions are, did I get to work on time? I heard a yes. What else? It's unclear. That's right. It's unclear. So sometimes we make assumptions and we insert additional information that isn't there. That's why I had to take my licensing exam several times, because I kept inferring things that weren't there. Name one person in my carpool. Do we know who was in my carpool? Okay, good, doesn't say. What is the address of Mr. Sharp's office? 5338? Okay, that one is in there. What injuries did I sustain? Pardon me? Twisted ankle? You guys are missing the most important one. I messed up my hair. That's a big one. Over whose umbrella did I trip? Michael Jackson. What type of job do I have? It's unclear. How did Michael Jackson feel when I called? You can infer that perhaps he was angry because he hung up on me, but we don't know for sure. Maybe he was making something delicious in his kitchen with buttery goodness and his phone slipped and so he accidentally hung up on me. We don't know. I mean, lots, I heard a chuckle over there. Thank you for that chuckle. We don't know, but sometimes we make up things when we don't know. We add information that isn't necessarily there. What time did I leave my apartment? Questionable. It says I came out of the apartment at 7:30 on the way to work. But leaving the apartment in the carpool, so we really don't know, right? So it's just information. This is an invitation, because if we're doing this together collectively with this one little paragraph, this little vignette, this little example, how much more are we perhaps adding information or missing information when we're working sometimes with our students? What is the name of my friend who witnessed the injuries? R.I.P. Prince. Okay. As a social worker, you will hear stories. Be mindful of your reaction, your facial expressions. Don't make assumptions, and that's kind of hard, because sometimes when you have access to a body of knowledge and experience, and if you tend to be right a lot, that's good data to go back to. But it can hurt us if we're right often, and then that one time, or that second or third time when we happen to be incorrect, it can create some challenges. So just be open to perhaps maybe I'm wrong about this, or perhaps I'm off about this, or let me collect a little more data. I need more information. But it's awfully gratifying to be right, but it also hinders us from being able to take in other information, because we really want to problem solve and be right, and kind of rifle through this exercise or this paragraph and have all the right answers. But sometimes we just don't know, and that can be uncomfortable for people to not know. I want to turn our attention now to attending skills. The first one is a posture of involvement. That's my little meerkat, because meerkats have excellent posture. So when you're engaging in any kind of conversation, you want to demonstrate open body language. No crossed hands or folded arms over your body, as they may convey being guarded or a lack of trust or defensiveness and it may make the other person feel unsafe. And in this instance, we're talking about students, but it can be anyone that you're having a difficult conversation with. Have appropriate body motion. Don't be squirrely. It's my little squirrel there. I notice sometimes that people have, and I have my own, self-soothing kind of motions that we engage in. Some people might, I don't know, rub their arm, or kind of rub their hand, or scratch their hands, or rub their fingers, or tap their foot, or, jiggle their knee, whatever it is that offers you some comfort. You have to be mindful that the other person may experience it as distracting, or being distracted, and therefore not engaged and inattentive. So you just have to really pay attention to your body language. You also want to maintain good eye contact, but you don't want to stare. You don't want to give somebody the stink eye, but you want to be engaged and looking often enough so that it's comfortable, but not staring them down so that it's uncomfortable. Finally, you want to have a non-distracting environment. This guy's kind of cluttered. You can't imagine meeting in that kind of office with all of that clutter. And it kind of reminds me of an example of, I'm a woman of a certain age, and I tend to like to be very cool. I don't like to be hot. And so in my office in the summertime, it is freezing. And sometimes I have to meet with students, and when they meet with me, oftentimes they're not dressed for a meeting, they're dressed for the weather. So they come in shorts and t-shirts or whatever, and then they get with me in my office and they're shivering. And I'm sitting there just as comfortable as can be because I like to be cool. So then it made me notice, well, Sylvia, when you're gonna have a meeting with a student in the summer, you might wanna let them know to bring a sweater or something because it tends to be cool in my office. Because successful meetings can't take place if someone's distracted. Thank you. I feel like a VIP. You just have someone summon and bring you water. Pardon me while I take a sip. Sorry, Megan, if that came through the mic. Marielle. So you want to have appropriate body motion, a non-distracting environment. Also, what I do when I'm going to have a meeting with a student, I let other people on my team know so that they're aware, because rarely is my door closed, and it's only closed if I don't want to be interrupted or engaged in some task that needs my full attention, or I'm meeting with a student. And we have glass panels on our doors in our office, and even though you have those glass panels, it is so inviting just to kind of peek in and see if there's anybody in there, and sometimes you might see somebody in there, and sometimes people still may knock, which is okay, because it may be something really, really important. But what I tend to say is, I'm in a meeting with a student right now, I'll check with you when I come out. It's just simple to do. It's not rude or abrasive. It's just kind of the matter of fact, because think about it. If you're in a meeting with a student and you get interrupted and you attend to whatever that interruption is, providing it's not an emergency, what kind of message do you think that sends to the student? Exactly, that they're not important, that their time isn't valuable. And so you don't want to do that. You want to really make sure that you plan to be uninterrupted to meet with a student. But I also know we work in a culture of interruptions, because a lot of the work that we do requires people to interrupt us. So we just have to work at navigating that. Following skills, door openers, minimal encourages, and infrequent questions. These are skills, the following skills, door openers are when you follow the speaker and listen for door openers, which is essentially a non-coercive invitation to talk, albeit minimally and often non-verbally. This is kind of the ahas, the okay, oh yes, the nodding of the head, those kind of things that lets the person know that you're tracking with them, that you're engaged, and that you're listening to them. Door openers allow you to communicate that you understand, and you don't have to be verbal when you do it. Minimal encourages relates to the amount of time that the listener speaks and the amount of direction the listener gives to the conversation. In other words, this should be very little, as the speaker is the one that is to maintain the steering or the control of the conversation, if that makes sense to you. And infrequent questions are open-ended, and you only use those when the conversation appears to have stalled. Infrequent questions promote clarity and encourage the speaker to continue to talk. One of the reflective skills is paraphrasing. This is providing the listener with a summary of what you understood the speaker to say. In essence, you are seeking to have the speaker affirm your listening skills by being able to paraphrase what you thought you heard. Only the speaker can assess whether or not you accurately understood what they said. And paraphrasing is meant to be short and concise. Think of it as, I use a lot of food analogies because I'm a foodie. Think of it as the zest of a lemon, which is the essence of the fruit, is the culmination of all that is the lemon. So just think of it that way. Also, make sure when you're paraphrasing, let's just say, for example, you're speaking with someone who tends to be verbose, long-winded. When you paraphrase, although you want to be concise, you don't want to shorten what they said into a sentence or two, because that's being dismissive. Someone goes into a long explanation of something that's important to them, and then you say in return, so basically what you're saying is that you don't like being here. That's not accurate or good paraphrasing. Does that make sense? So you kind of want to match what they said, but if you're trying to condense it into one sentence, that means you checked out a long time ago and you just wanted to put what they said into one little sentence and be done with it, and that doesn't cultivate more conversation. Reflective meaning is another reflecting skill. Reflective meaning is when the listener captures the emotional content or is able to identify the emotion that is being displayed by the speaker. Here's an example. This is a type of listening which provides a mirror to the speaker so that the state or emotion they are in is recognized. In Robert Bolton's book, People Skills, he uses the following example, and I've taken some liberties with the example a little bit. Picture a young father on a morning when everything is going wrong. The baby cries, the phone rings, the toast gets burnt. If the wife notices this and says something like, "God, can't you learn to cook toast?" the father's reaction is likely to be explosive. But instead, if you picture an alternative, the same events happen. Toast is burning, baby's crying, phone is ringing. But the wife or the mother says, "Honey, it's a rough morning for you." First the baby cries, then the phone, and now the toast. This is a reflective response because you're accurately capturing or describing what's happening without casting judgment or blame on the person. Acknowledging what her husband is experiencing without any judgment or criticism. Imagine how much better that feels than, "Can't you just cook toast?" You see the difference? Same events, just different responses. This process takes time and practice, but yields great results when implemented. And you don't have to change your personality to become a good listener and to be able to successfully facilitate difficult conversations. You just have to care enough and be engaged enough, but you don't have to change your personality. Reflective feeling, this is when you identify the feeling associated with the situation or the feelings displayed during the conversation. In the example that I augmented from Bolton's book, frustration could be one of the emotions identified with the crying baby, the smell of burnt toast, and the ringing phone, the chaotic morning, frustration. So that would be an emotion that could be reflected back. A summative reflection is, when done properly and accurately, promotes efficiency in the communication process. A reward for getting this step right is when the listener says, exactly, or that's it, or oh yes. Have you ever had an engagement or an interaction rather with a person where you're listening to them and you're paraphrasing back, or you're letting them know you understand, and they're like, yes, you get it. That feels like, that's when you know you hit pay dirt and you struck oil. That is incredibly rewarding. And just as a side note, it's really important to always have someone in your life that you can do that with, someone that gets you, where they almost can maybe finish your sentences, or you start and they're like, yes, me too. That's a really good feeling. So when you have that happen, when you're having a difficult conversation, that just fosters better communication. The next active listening components, there are 6 of them on the screen there. Attention. I have yours right now, so thank you for your attention. You have to have someone's attention if you're going to be engaged in a conversation with them. Body language is very important. Demonstrating an open posture, a calm kind of presence, is welcoming and invites the other person to talk. But if your body language is where you're folded over yourself, you're scowling, you're inattentive, you don't want to be there, that just shuts conversation down. I skipped over silence, but silence is important, but not to the extent that it provokes anxiety. There can be a punitive silence where you're withholding and you're not talking because you're punishing the person, or you're openly displaying your lack of attention by being silent. And then there's the silence that says, I'm listening. I want to hear you. So you have to make sure you're displaying and using silence the right way. When I was in private practice, there used to be silence sometimes in some of the sessions, and many people get uncomfortable with silence. They feel like they have to fill it up. I love it, because if you wait long enough, you'll be rewarded. And I don't know where I learned this, but I heard it takes about 7 seconds if you're willing to wait 7 seconds. And 7 seconds can be really long, can feel like really long, but if you just wait it out, the other person will come forward. And if they don't, you can interrupt and say, take your time, gather your thoughts, I'm here. And that gives them permission. And that also lets them know you're not going to do the work for them, and that you are willing to wait for them to come forward. But being silent and waiting for them is also important. Oh, this is my favorite graphic of this. Repeat back. Does anybody know who that is? From what movie? Okay, how many people don't know who that is? Just one? Okay, I'll explain it to you later, Hillary. I like this one because repeat back. And so my intention with this slide was, play it again, Sam, the famous line from the movie. So, but you have to be of a certain age to kind of get that reference. But anyway, you want to repeat back to the person what you've heard so that they know that you understood what they said. And you don't want to be a parrot, but you want to paraphrase and repeat back so that they know that you were following with them. This next one, take your time. I call it turtling it. I love turtles. Just take your time. You don't have to be in a rush to do this. Sometimes you're engaged in a conversation with a student, and if it seems like it's going to require more time, schedule another meeting. You don't have to rush to get it all done. Say, you know what, we're out of time, but this is so important. Let's schedule another meeting so that we can finish this. You don't have to put it all in a certain time frame. Also, respond only to what is being said. In our previous example, the listening exercise, how we kind of inferred and added things, you want to make sure that when you're responding to the student, that you're responding to what is actually being said and not the layers of emotion or the other layers of meaning that you may be inserting that may not be present or necessary. Does that make sense to folks? This is just an example. You all know what open-ended questions are, what closed-ended questions are. Open-ended questions yield more information. Asking the right question can yield important information, and the end goal is to enhance communication and build trust, which in turn cultivates more of the same. We all want to replicate good, positive, and pleasant experiences because it feels good to be heard and to be understood. I am privy to that on a regular weekly basis in my supervision because we typically co-create our agenda and talk about things and listen to each other, and it's just a good experience, and my weekly supervision is kind of one of the highlights of my week here at Loyola during my work week. It's just nice. The one question there that I have that's highlighted under open-ended questions, how do you feel about that? I would tend to kind of steer away from that kind of question only because you have to be prepared for whatever the answer may be. And in your role as field instructor and working with students, you don't want to become their therapist because you're not their therapist, even though you may have a clinical lens, even though you may have a practice or you may work with clients. A student intern is not a client. So while you're interested in their feelings about things, you don't want the discussion to morph into a therapy session with the student. So that's why I kind of shy away about how do you feel about that. Another way to ask that is, what are your thoughts about that? It's just a little bit different way of asking the same kind of question. A general rule or trait about open-ended questions is that they are invitations to more information. They are akin to demonstrating curiosity. So when you ask an open-ended question, you're essentially demonstrating care and concern and the desire to learn more about the person's perspective and get more information from them. And then you have samples of what closed-ended questions are. Conversely, they can take an accusatory tone and they can limit their responses to yes or no, which can convey to the person that you don't really want to hear more what they have to say. So you want to refrain from the use of closed-ended questions because they really don't yield more information for you. I've also learned to refrain from the use of why as a question. The question why, I've come to experience, is full of judgment. And the implication is that you know better than the other person. Well, why'd you do it that way? Instead, you can demonstrate curiosity. Can you tell me more about what you were thinking when you made that choice? Or can you tell me some of the underpinnings of what made you make that decision? That's different and less loaded than why'd you do that? Why'd you say that? Like, what was going on with you? What was the catalyst that made you say that instead of something else? Is this resonating with folks? Okay. This is the recipe for the difficult conversation process. It's a 9-step process. First, you want to be prepared. And so I have my little bowl and mixing spoons. You want to be prepared. Like if you're going to make a dish, you want to get everything out already and measure your ingredients beforehand. You want to choose a time and a place and explain the purpose of the meeting. You don't want to send the student an email and say, I need to see you in my office today at 3. You can put something in the subject line so that they have an idea of what you want to meet about and give a time. Because that can be very intimidating, it can be overwhelming, and usually people don't call you into their office to say, you're doing a great job. So you may want to start doing that too, so that they're like, oh, maybe they're calling me in to tell me how fabulous I am. Not always the case, but just don't be cryptic about what the meeting is about. So set aside time and place, frame the conversation in a neutral, mutual way. It's going to be a conversation. I want to learn more about what happened. I want to learn more about your perspective. Seek to understand the other person and listen first, rather than be in a rush to get your viewpoint across and wield your power, because there is inherently power with being a field instructor. There is a power differential, and I know no one intends to misuse that power, but it's there. Seek to be understood, and you will likely have the other person's rapt attention if you first give them yours. They are more likely to be engaged in what you have to say as you have provided them with an opportunity to speak first. Change your words and conversations into actions, needs, and interests. So you want to translate the outcome of your conversation into kind of like a course of action or an action plan. Create options that provide a win-win for all parties concerned. And like I said earlier, you don't necessarily have to come away from the table skipping, because if someone's coming away from the table doing cartwheels and they're really happy, that means one person got everything that they wanted. And that's not a good win-win situation. That's a one-person win. But you want to come from the table with a reasonable, agreeable kind of outcome for both or all parties concerned. Yes, thank you.
When you say prepare, what does that mean?
Prepare for the conversation that you're going to have.
You're collecting the pointing across on your end. What does that mean, I guess? I'm just sort of feel very out.
You're, something happened and you want to have a conversation, but you have your data, your observable, measurable data, and you want to approach it with curiosity. So sometimes when people are preparing for a difficult conversation, they're headstrong into getting their point across. They just want to kind of talk about the person, what they did wrong, rather than saying, you know what, this was uncomfortable, this was awkward, this was awful. I want to gather more information. So you want to prepare to be curious, because if you're not curious, that means you're going in with your preconceived notions and you're going in with your plan, and it's not inviting the other person to share their perspective. So that's what I mean by prepare.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective too, because I know that for myself, like as a supervisor, if there's conflict, I also have to prepare the facts to try to remove my emotions from it if I felt like I was personally attacked or something, you know? And so I think that that's good to try to prepare that neutrality of trying to come with that openness. So I'm very appreciative.
Thank you for sharing that, because we do get involved. We do have to separate our emotions from it, because our egos are in there, our knowledge base, all of that's in there. So you have to have places to go to kind of process that and keep it separate. Because sometimes students do kind of get under our skin sometimes. And when I say that, that's normal and it's healthy, as long as you don't react to that, as long as you can separate that and sift through that and work through that someplace else, because they are there because they want to learn, and they are there because they need our help, support, and assistance. And so in order to help them learn, we have to be at our best, and we can't be at our best if we're frustrated with them. Does that hold true? But it's okay to acknowledge and say, sometimes they get on my nerves, because sometimes they might, but as long as that's not conveyed to the student, and as long as you have another safe place to go to process and deal with that. So that's what I mean, be prepared. So thank you for the question. We're going to have an opportunity in short order to practice some of these skills and concepts. Oh, let me go through the rest of them. Invent options for mutual gain, find a mutually agreed upon solution. And this is the most important part for me, step 9, to kind of check and choose a time to revisit and check back to see if the solution is working. That's kind of like just following up. To me, that's the equivalent of when I work with students when they're going out on interviews to get an internship, and they always forget, to me, that most important piece is the thank you follow-up email. I mean, sometimes people don't do this anymore, but I always tell them that follow-up thank you for the interview email is an opportunity to express why they're the best candidate for the internship and to reiterate their interest in the internship. So choosing to be deliberate, intentional about following up and creating a date and time to check in lets the other person know that this is so important to me that I want to follow up to check in to make sure that we're still on track or that we're still working well together. Does that make sense? Preparing for a difficult conversation, you want to separate, you don't want to react, first of all. You want to be able to choose to respond. You have better results when you choose to respond versus react. Reaction is impulsive, usually fueled by anger, and it's the first thing that comes out. But if you choose to respond, you can be more thoughtful and consider how you want to behave. So take your time and don't react, but choose to respond. Separate the person from the problem. Avoid blame. The person is not their actions. Be clear and set your outcome up front and hold yourself accountable and check to make sure if you're making assumptions about the other person's intentions. Know your emotional cues when under stress. That's just very important. When you're approaching a level of irritability that requires an intervention or attention, there are some days, they're rare, but there are some days when I really shouldn't be in the general public, okay? But, I mean, I have to work, so some days, if there's a day like that, I have the option to close my door for a few minutes to collect myself, to gather myself, to breathe, or whatever it is that I need to do so that whatever's going on internally with me doesn't spill out into my workplace and that I don't hold other people hostage for whatever's going on with me. So you want to make sure you do the same thing with the student to know what your emotional triggers are. And you can even say, you know what, I know we're scheduled to meet today, but I'm just distracted by a lot of other things. Can we reschedule? You can ask for permission to do that and let the student know that you're not in the best place to meet or whatever it is you guys agree to do. I mean, it shows a level of vulnerability, and it can actually cultivate more trust when your student intern knows that, wow, he or she is human just like me. They're having a not so great day, because they put you on pedestals. They think you're like the greatest thing. I mean, a lot of times they do. Sometimes they don't. But, I mean, we want them to think that. But we also want to let them know that we're human. And while we're being human, we also want to be compassionate and caring at the same time. Be aware of your needs and what lays underneath your position. Is your purpose in having the difficult discussion to demonstrate that you're right? Do you want to highlight your intellect? Do you want to let the student know that you have so many years of experience, that you know what you're talking about? Do you want to showcase what you know? Or instead, is your intention to really serve the student and help them to learn? Sometimes it can be a combination of both, but it's better if we are sincerely there to shape, support, mold, and model for our students. That's the best outcome for all parties concerned. Be interested and invested in what they have to share. As a field instructor, you want to be generous with your knowledge and know that although you possess a wealth of knowledge and experience, that you do not have a monopoly on wisdom, and that the student also brings their own brand of curiosity and wisdom to the situation. And while you are teacher, instructor, you are simultaneously student, and you can learn from the students as well. So just be open to that piece, because if we have a blind spot about what the student can impart into us, we miss out. Make certain to provide observable data to support your view. And this goes to your point earlier, when you're preparing for a difficult conversation, you're gathering facts, which is important to have, because you want to present to the student, I want to have this meeting today because I've observed this. You want to have data, because the student may not have data. They might have their feelings, but you're going to have data because you're separating feelings from their behavior. Feelings are not data, except when they are. And I'm not talking about the internal warning signs that we get if we exercise them enough when there's danger. I'm not talking about that. Don't ever ignore those. I'm just talking about in situations with students, you don't want to rely on feelings. Students feel, they kind of, that's their data point, feelings. And so you kind of want to separate them from that and say, can you tell me what actions, can you tell me what you observe? Because you want to kind of get away from the feelings point, because the students' feelings, that's their kind of barometer, that's their compass. And we want to teach them that feelings are not the only way we do this work that we do, if that makes sense. You want to talk about the data. You have to support your view, their view, and this BATNA, I kind of like that word. What is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement? And that is a collective effort on both you and the student that you both come up with, what you both can agree to live with. And remember, everybody doesn't have to be really happy or come away from the table happy, but there has to be some level of satisfaction with whatever you both have agreed to. Now, here's where we get to the good part. There's some vignettes that we're going to practice with. So I'm going to show you what not to do. On your table, in the table tent there's a vignette. So the tables are numbered. We're going to look at this first one together, the debate, the good example, and the bad example. And then the subsequent videos, they're all very short. I'm going to play them. And whatever one you have on your table, you're going to rework it as a group. And we're going to give you 10, 15 minutes to rework them, and then come back to the larger group and have you report back on how you remedied or repaired or fixed the vignette that you're responsible for reworking. And I'll put mics on the table so that we all can hear, because this is being videotaped, so we can hear everyone's response. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. I'm going to do the first one. Oops. Adjust the volume.
I agree. We need to pick the client up from the airport, but we are not using a limo service. It is over the top and totally unnecessary.
Well, that's just great. Why don't we just throw them into the back of a pickup? I've got a backpacking tent and a sleeping bag they could use in the parking lot. That should make you an even bigger hero with accounting.
Is that what you think of me, that I'm just out to get some sort of recognition?
Hey, don't get defensive with me. But it does seem that what's more important to you is saving money rather than making money. I don't know who you're striking a pose for, but it certainly isn't the client.
Is that what you think of me? That I'm someone who just cares about myself and nothing else?
I don't know, Trenton. Search your own heart. All I know is that I get no support from you when it comes to doing what's best to win new business. There's got to be some motive behind what you're doing.
You are out of control, Jordan. You know, I don't have to take this from you. You know what? You spend what you want to spend, but I am not signing off on your expense reports. You are on your own. I agree. We need to pick up the clients at the airport, but we are not using a limo. It is over the top and totally unnecessary.
Can we take a minute to talk about something that's a concern to me? I think we'd both benefit from the discussion.
We are talking about the limo, and I am not taking any more flack from corporate over wasteful and self-serving spending.
Well, I'd like to talk about what our spending priorities should be. When I brought up the idea of having a limo meet the clients at the airport, you made a final statement that we aren't using a limo service.
And we aren't using a limo service. It is not an option.
I don't think we should do it needlessly either. In this case, the client has a tight turnaround, only an hour to spend with us. If we let them get a rental car like last time, we may end up with only 30, 40 minutes for our pitch. We don't have anyone who can pick them up. Now, we've been over these points before, and you don't seem to disagree with them. That makes me wonder if the reason you want to forego the limo is to avoid having to justify the expense with corporate, even if it might be a wise decision. Is that part of what's going on here, or am I jumping to conclusions?
That's not it exactly.
Well, if you see it differently, I'd like to hear your view.
Well, to be honest, we've had so many receipts coming in that have been seemingly excessive. I've had to go back and forth with corporate just to get them paid. I feel like I'm losing credibility with them. My fear is that they'll limit our budget if I come at them with something like this.
Okay, so that was
You know,
an
I wish you
example
would,
of the good and bad. So table number 1 should have this vignette, and I'll play it, and you'll rework it to make it better. Does this make sense to everyone?
Hi, we're almost ready. Sam just got home from work. You know, I think the little weasel figured that if he worked late enough, he might get away with skipping out on the whole thing. He was wrong.
Oh, he doesn't want to go to a high school graduation. Go figure. Nothing satisfies me more than squatting on a steel bench for 2 hours, listening to a high school principal drone on until I sink into a coma.
Now, honey, what did I say about tonight?
Jeez, it's like living with my mom. Can't you go 5 minutes without correcting me? I mean, really, is that asking too much?
Okay, all right, here's the plan. This thing goes 1 minute over an hour, we are out of there, okay? Everybody is gonna scoot because I'm driving the car and that car is pulling out after 60 minutes. We got that?
We'll talk about that on the way there.
There's nothing to talk about. Come on, here we go.
Yeah, Sam, you...
If you humiliate me like that one more time in public, you will be sorry. Do you hear me?
I was only kidding. You know what your problem is? You don't have a sense of humor. That and the fact that you're controlling and patronizing and sucking the life out of me.
What was that?
Oh, nothing, dear.
So table number 2 or 1 will rework this example. And then here's the
Can you believe it? We missed the deadline for the Archon proposal. What a ship of incompetence and idiots we have here.
What are you implying?
If your crew had worked a little overtime, we might have made the schedule. And Jackie's group led the league in errors.
Whatever. Is there a reason why you decided to tear into us?
I'm sorry. I didn't want to come in here storming and causing problems. I can't believe I just sunk to name calling. This is about all of us. This isn't about you. What I really want to do is talk about the issue and see if we can improve the process. I really didn't want to finger point and blame.
Hi, we're almost ready. Sam just got home from work. You know, I think the little weasel figured that if he worked late enough...
one here. Just going to show what needs to be repaired. And then some of you have other scenarios at your table that you will rework. Just going to look at.
Rick, I wanted to take a minute to update you about the Larry situation.
What situation?
Well, we'll be giving him notice sometime tomorrow.
What? We're firing him? He's the only one around here with any real design skills.
True, he's talented, but he can't get along with anyone on his team.
Well, can we at least talk about it?
I'd like to consider both sides of the issues before we take action. Would that be okay?
Sure. We can each share our views and see where that takes us, hopefully to a place where we're both satisfied.
Sounds good.
Go ahead.
Okay. I get the fact that he can be a bit prickly to work with, but the designs he's created over the past half year have been nothing short of spectacular. It took us 3 years to find someone with his talent.
He may be good. I'm not sure he's that good. In any case, I'm the one who ends up listening to his colleagues complain about his abusive style.
True, but I'm not sure we've offered him much help. It seems to me that when people have complained to you, you've asked them to talk to him directly. I'm not sure that's the most helpful coaching.
Are you suggesting I went about it the wrong way?
All I know is that you're the one who's always telling everyone how we need to give people a chance, make sure we're giving feedback and all that stuff, and now you just want to throw them out in the street?
Well, excuse me if I care about the other 150 people who have to put up with him. What about them?
Now you're just twisting my words. You see, this is why it can be hard to talk to you.
Oh, so now it's about me?
No, it's about Larry. And yeah, he's ruffled a few feathers with employees who everyone knows are far too sensitive in the first place, and then bang, you pull the trigger.
This isn't some knee-jerk reaction, Rick. This is the result of a lot of thought. Do you think I get some sort of pleasure out of letting someone go? Or that the complaints against him have been exaggerated? Do you think I get some sort of pleasure out of letting...
Okay, that one was reworked, but I didn't want to show you the rework because I want you to do it yourselves at your tables. So I want to take about, give you 15 minutes or so to work through the vignette that you've been assigned, that you have at your table. This table over here, I think you just have a slip of paper with an example on it. And then we'll reconvene to hear your application of the concepts we've gone over thus far. You guys got a small group there. Is everybody ready? Have they prepared their example? Okay, I'm going to hand out microphones, and then we'll start with how you've remedied. Okay. We start with table number 1. Where's table number 1?
That's us.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
I can hear you.
My name's Rachel, and Joyce and Kelly and I had scenario number 1, which was the graduation. So some issues that we came up with were nobody was listening to each other. It started off with name calling, the woman calling her husband a weasel, and some additional name calling at the end. It seemed that each individual had their own agenda. There were a lot of passive-aggressive comments and attacking. Again, especially at the end, it seemed like she was the wife, was like, how dare you, better not embarrass me like that again. So a lot of talk like that. So we thought of some ways that it could have gone differently. So avoiding name calling. They were all running late, so kind of pulling it together and having a little debrief of saying, we're late, okay, let's make the next steps. Managing and processing any feelings that they were all in this together, maybe providing some choices instead of one person dominating the decision-making. Also seemed like maybe some private conversations could have happened between some of the couples. And then circling back to why they were going to this poor kid's high school graduation that nobody wanted to go to, but going back to the base that they're all going to support the student and why they're going, that could help them manage their emotions.
Okay, thank you. Table number 2.
Okay, so our scenario was not one that was up on the board, so I'll read it to everyone. A student tells you that her religious beliefs make it difficult for her to work with clients who identify as LGBTQ. How do you initiate a conversation about this? What steps do you take to ensure that this conversation goes well? So we interpreted this scenario in a few possible ways. The first of which being that the student has approached you and is essentially asking for help to maybe open up or change this behavior, and your job is to kind of gauge where they're at. So one of the things that we discussed doing as a lead would be to acknowledge that the student clearly has some level of self-awareness, recognizes that it's a problem, and it's interfering with their ability to be effective in the job and maybe putting the client's safety at stake. So creating a safe space to then ask open-ended questions to find out more about where this, where the pain point is, where the discomfort is coming from. And then from there, gauging, maybe creating a plan to either reach out to a mentor or reach out to somebody in their religious community to help them move past some of these feelings of discomfort, or to, let's see, what are some of the things, what other things we said? To just identify that maybe their feelings are rooted in a lack of experience, or possibly to just broaden their point of view or broaden the picture and recognize how they can be achieve their professional goals and set aside whatever stigmas they have around LGBTQ community, people in the LGBTQ community. And then the other scenario was if you as a supervisor recognize that there are issues and they're not having good client relationships, maybe to approach that person and set up a plan for regular meetings and checkpoints and goals if the person expresses that they're open to changing their behavior. I think that was everything. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Very nice job. Table number 3.
I don't know if this is working. So we had the mutual respect, the last one, and I don't know if we missed something, but we had a little bit shorter of response. So it seemed like when they came into the situation, the man didn't know what the meeting was going to be about. Right. So maybe having a little discussion, kind of that heads up communication.
The preparation.
Yeah, and then they seemed to be kind of communicating well at the beginning, and then there was a shift to where it seemed like she initially was saying, oh, I'm open to feedback, but then when he was giving feedback, she got kind of defensive. And so I don't know if we had a solution for that one, but just thinking about him having some time to prepare before the meeting was kind of the main thing.
Sounds like it was a surprise to him that he didn't know that
so
that
they
was
kind
going
of
to
started
happen.
on the wrong foot. So.
Right. And it seemed like she had made the decision already and he didn't know that she had made the decision to get rid of the other person.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Next table, number 4.
Hello. So we had a situation one up there where basically an employee wants a new software to help them make their job more efficient. They keep going to their supervisor, asking, the supervisor keeps going to their boss, and the boss keeps saying no, and they keep going back, sorry, boss said no. And then the employee runs into the boss in a nondescript area and said, ask them, why are you refusing this? And the boss is like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so the employee has to decide what they're going to do with the supervisor. Are they going to go back and talk to them about it? Because it seems like the supervisor didn't even talk to the boss about what they were requesting. So we had a very robust conversation at our table. All of us coming from very different perspectives, and even having a conversation about what is the key goal of this conversation. Is the key goal to get the equipment that you want, or is the key goal to repair the relationship that you now don't feel like you can trust your supervisor, that they're actually going to advocate for you? And so we all agreed that we would have a conversation, that we would set up a meeting with the supervisor and try to come to a point of understanding. We disagreed on whether we come up front and say, hey, I ran into the boss and say what or not that very, but or to just ask for like, hey, help me understand more about the software and see how they respond and kind of like get a gauge of where their relationship is. It was like more of a secondary unspoken kind of goal kind of thing. So it was a good conversation.
That's good. I love the word robust. I just love the word robust. And I also love the fact that you reframed it when you said, hey, can you help me understand? That's much different than, well, I heard you didn't even order it. You know, so that's good. That's good. And you don't always have to end up agreeing. You know, that's why the value in different perspectives that's so rich, because there are lots of different ways. That's why if there's a color to social work, it's gray. Okay, because there's so many gray areas. I'm not talking about that 50 Shades movie stuff, okay? I'm talking about just because there's so many subtle nuances, if this, then that. There's no one right answer. There's a lot of gray areas and different things that we would do providing whatever the situation or the circumstance is. So thank you for having that robust conversation.
What would you do if we were in a flip situation, right? You were the supervisor, found out an employee would be asked to do something so they couldn't do it. You found out they never followed through. Like, how would that shift the conversation, right? So that just had it.
Thank you. Number 4. Oh, 5, I'm sorry. Is it 5 on your thing? Okay.
Do you want us to go?
Yes.
Okay. We had situation 2 up there, which is where you're on a joint task force with someone and you're not their direct supervisor. They maybe work for another agency that has a supervisor. And so there's work that you do on the task force, but they often, it competes with their work that they have to do for their job. And so deadlines get missed and you often don't know about it until the deadlines have passed, and so you want to say something. So we talked about preparing for the meeting, just kind of checking in with our own emotions and laying out the facts, so laying out that the times that the deadlines have been missed, but we also talked about checking in with what role we played in the situation. So are we just telling them the very last minute deadline versus should we set earlier deadlines? And then just talking about troubleshooting ways to have a better communication. Basically, those last few sentences were kind of the plan of what we wanted to come out of the meeting of it would be nice to be notified before the missed deadline, or let's establish a new communication pattern around when we check in. I think we could also check in with the person about their workload and their commitment to not necessarily their like emotional commitment to the committee, but is it realistic in their job role to serve on this task force? Could someone else fill that role? I wouldn't go to their supervisor, but maybe would encourage them to go back to their supervisor and troubleshoot ways that they could balance the commitment.
I hear in all of your suggestions for solutions the collaborative part, because nobody went in to attack anybody or get anybody in trouble. The end goal is always to have a successful resolution and to get the workload balanced, or to get your needs met, to have deadlines that you can honor so that deadlines don't pass by to create more stress for you. And so it was a real interesting take, rather than, this person's holding me up or they're not telling me then my deadlines and I can't do my work. It was like, what can we do? Let's reevaluate. Maybe this person has too much work, or maybe this person doesn't even need to be on this committee because they have to do these. That's a real social worker perspective. So thank you for that. Next group, is there a table 6? Yay.
Okay, we had situation number 3. So you're beginning to suspect that the respondent, a peer you like and admire, is stealing from the university. At first, you heard rumors that he or she was taking supplies home. One day you noticed what looked like a university tablet in his or her hand as he or she left work. You didn't have enough evidence to take action, just enough to start creating a story in your mind. However, you just walked by the respondent's work area and noticed an external hard drive that belongs to your university in the respondent's backpack. The hard drive is never to leave the office. You've decided to talk to your colleague about the problem. Hint, rumors are not facts. Ours seemed pretty easy for us, I think, because it's a colleague or a peer. We just decided that we would confront the person and just come to them as like more of a friend and somebody who is concerned, in just kind of saying, hey, I noticed that this hard drive was in your bag, you know, just so you know you can get in trouble for that because that's the university's policy, and you know, we're not sure if that's something that you were aware of. So again, like not assuming that the tablet was theirs or anything like that, but just going by what we actually physically saw. And that was pretty much it, because we don't want to assume anything else, and we admire this person and it's a peer, so we're feeling comfortable
I
talking to
love
this
the
person.
fact that you guys didn't make any assumptions. And this is the Code of Ethics advises us to do just what your solution was. And I've coined the phrase, I've been using it for years, carefront rather than confront, because you're kind of carefronting the person rather than accusing them. You're demonstrating curiosity. It's like, hey, I just want you to know this is the policy. I saw that in your bag. I don't want you to get in trouble. Rather than, what are you doing with that?
Right.
Why do you have that?
Right.
How many pads do you have? I mean, you know,
Right,
so.
yeah.
And that third example, by the way, was based on something I did. I'm just kidding. That's not true. That's not true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Last group? Oh, you guys already went, right? Okay. And we had one more table, but Nicole and I problem solved together. I didn't even know she was sitting at the table by herself, and I'm sitting up here talking, and so we went and we kind of problem solved together. An example that's from her agency. So how was this exercise for you all? Was it useful to kind of process and look at different avenues and different perspectives on how to have a difficult conversation? Yep. Well, this is just a brief summary. Don't make assumptions. That's a big thing. Listen first and seek to understand, and later to be understood. Don't rush to judgment. Summarize and ask open-ended questions, because we all know open-ended questions yield more information, and you're demonstrating curiosity when you're asking open-ended questions. Seek to be understood after you have listened and sought to understand, and agree where you can. And also, it's very important to know that you can disagree without becoming disagreeable. Okay, you don't have to agree on everything that happens in a difficult conversation, but you do have to be respectful and demonstrate professionalism when you do it, but you don't have to always agree on every outcome. Does that make sense? Okay. Do you all have any questions or have any other examples from your agencies that you might like to process? Because I have one final piece that I want to cover, and then I want to turn your attention to complete an evaluation, because the evaluations are really important because they help us to improve these trainings. But are there any questions about the process of having a difficult conversation? None? Yes.
I'm curious on your thoughts of when you have to revisit a difficult conversation you've already had one time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on ways you feel like those are misconducted?
Okay, that kind of happened with my conversation with Nicole, and I love it. It's actually really good, because that means either the person didn't understand, or there's something preventing them from acknowledging or taking action on the proposed remedy. And so still, always approach it from curiosity. Say, you know what, we've had this check-in now, and last time when we met, we agreed we were going to do this, and this didn't happen. I'm kind of curious as to what's been the obstacle, or I'm curious about what might be constraining you from doing this. Is there something about this that's difficult? I mean, just curiosity, because as long as you're curious and asking questions, you're not leading to a conclusion or making an assumption, or you don't already have the end made up. So some people might look at a situation, well, she didn't do this, she didn't turn this in, she had this deadline, so that's it. Well, maybe something got in the way of, him or her making the deadline. Maybe something came up that they're not talking about. So you can express curiosity. Did something happen? Because I know I asked for this report to be done at 5 or to be done at 3, and now it's 5 o'clock. I needed this for this meeting. I got to the meeting, I couldn't give, my superior what they asked for because I was waiting on you to, is there something, getting in the way? Just curiosity. And then sometimes, I'll get to you, Nicole, I see your hand. Sometimes, this is really important, everything doesn't always end in a nice little box with a nice little bow. Sometimes, just say for example, in the worst case scenario, some students just may not be ready. And they might need some more work elsewhere outside of the internship setting to prepare them. So it's really an invitation to support them, to say, you know what, we've had these meetings now, and we created this support structure and these parameters, and it seems like this is still difficult for you. And so I'm curious as whether or not now is a good time for this. And I'd like to make these recommendations for you to do. So sometimes they just may not be ready, but it's always done out of care and concern and support. So we don't say no and reject you. We say no, not right now, and in the interim, maybe this. Does that make sense to you or help? Nicole, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I would just add to something from my experience that's really helpful is to have a difficult conversation, maybe setting a date to have another conversation 4 weeks from now or whatever makes better sense. So it's not like, it doesn't have to be this adversary situation where it's like, I know we discussed this, we have a plan of action, I know we're gonna see some progress, or let's plan to meet and have this conversation. Have an update rather than, this isn't happening, we discussed it, let's meet again. Like, just being very proactive and being very prepared, and it makes that sense to follow.
Does that help? Yeah. But scheduling that, I see your hand now. Scheduling that time to go back, and if the end result hasn't been reached, I might take some more time. And then eventually you might get to a deadline where this isn't going to work, so here's the alternative, or here's what we have to offer.
I was just going to say, I think that it's really the second or third conversation about the same stuff, that being really clear when you're having conversations about consequences and valuing rules, because everybody has consequences, some of them are natural, some of them are so I think that one of the things that I do is have conversations about what this will mean if it doesn't happen by the state, or what that will mean for you, what that will mean for me, what that will mean for me.
Good. Consequences are good, and that's why we have deadlines. Okay, I have one final portion to this, and this goes back to my being a foodie. Remember earlier I said I was a big foodie? Okay, I've created this really delicious, it doesn't have, any kind of allergens in it, so it's not gonna bother anybody. It's delicious, it's low-cal, you can eat as much as you want and not gain weight or get sick. So will you indulge me for a moment? Okay, it's really good. My mixing bowl. It's a recipe for being a good social worker. Okay. Begin with equal parts caring and concern. Openness, compassion. I always need more of this because I suffer from compassion fatigue on occasion, so I try to stay well stocked with compassion. Integrity, ethics, optimism, service, selflessness, and this is the most important ingredient, a healthy dose of a sense of humor. And you stir all of that together, mix well, serve liberally to those who need care. And this serves an unlimited number of people. And I have a recipe to be a good social worker in case you want to take one with you. Okay? And And just one final thing for you guys. Thank you for being here.